Now we are not surprised when the unelected, illegitimate administration of George Bush ignores us. But we are shocked that the Democratic majority in Congress chose war over us as we say, bring our troops home now. The answer is clear. Our country has been hijacked. What about a livable wage for America's workers? What about the right of return for Katrina survivors? What about repealing the Patriot Act, the Secret Evidence Act, and the Military Tribunals Act? Why is impeachment off the table?
40 years ago, there was a march on the Pentagon. And here we are 40 years later, marching on the Pentagon in another illegal and immoral war. When is it gonna stop? I don't want to be marching when I'm 90 years old in 2047 in another illegal immoral war. Well, I'll probably be rolling in my wheelchair, but I don't want to do that. Let's stop this bullshit now. Do you know why our country gets in these bullshit wars all the time? It's for the corporations. It's to make people like Halliburton and Exxon and Blackwater and Raytheon, is to make them rich. It's to line the pockets of George Bush and Dick Cheney and all the war criminals.
Bush and Cheney and our Congress are playing games with these mothers' children's lives. They are playing games. And the latest game they are playing is with the war supplemental spending bill. They passed a bill in both houses and Senate to the president that had a non-binding deadline date. You got to end the war by this date if you don't mind, if it's not too much trouble. And Bush vetoed it and said, give me a bill with no deadline in it. They said, well, we're going to get tough. We're going to stand up to this president. We're going to send him a bill with no deadline in it. But we're going to only pay for 2 months at a time instead of 4 months. That'll show him. And we're going to put in these benchmarks. Well, the Senate doesn't like the 2-month deal, so we don't even know if that's going to last after the Senate version and the conference committee. So what we're looking at in terms of standing up to this president and his war are benchmarks. But almost no account of the benchmarks tells you what the hell they are. How many people have even heard what the benchmarks are? There you go. There are 5 of them, and the first one, and the important one, and the one they actually care about, is we need to steal Iraq's oil. The Iraqi parliament needs to pass an oil law, and this oil law is drafted, and it frees up over 2/3 of Iraq's oil to the ownership of foreign corporations. And by the way, Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey voted no on this bill. And Congressman Dennis Kucinich raised the topic of this oil theft in the Democratic caucus and was yelled at by the same guy who yelled at Tina Richards and called her an idiot liberal because he brought up the topic of us stealing Iraq's oil. Who's been saying for 5 years that this was about blood for oil? The peace movement.
You don't need a Congress investigation. Actually, if you go back to Watergate, you had a select Senate committee that began the investigations. Started in the Senate, bipartisan, equal representation. That's what Howard Baker asked the famous question, what did the president know and when did he know it? The same questions applicable to George W. Bush. What did the president know before the war started? When did he know it? Same questions. There's no formula. House can conduct inquiries, Senate can conduct inquiries. Those inquiries have to be focused, though, on getting us the answers to the basic questions. What are those? Why did the president drive us into war on a basis of deception? And how did he do it? And document what he knew and when he knew it. That's critical, because no American should ever have to give one drop of blood for a lie. Ever.
I have been asked on behalf of the Stop the War Coalition in Britain, of which I am the Vice President, to convey to this great rally here in Washington, D.C., the fraternal greetings of 100,000 demonstrators in London this afternoon, marching in the cause of peace and freedom and against the war and occupation. And I have just finished, or will this afternoon finish, a tour around the United States, which has been attended by many thousands of people, and been attended by the sense in which there is an absolute need for your country and my country to stand shoulder to shoulder against the war criminals Tony Blair and George W. Bush. Demonstrate to the people of the world, and particularly the people of the occupied world, that these criminals are not acting in our name. This is not any clash. This is not any clash of civilizations. This is not a war between the people of the West and the people of the East. This is not a war between Christianity and Islam. George Bush doesn't represent any civilization. George Bush and Tony Blair certainly don't represent Jesus Christ and the great religion of Christianity. Christians believe in the prophets, peace be upon them. Bush and Cheney believe in the prophets and how to get a piece of them.
Our troops are in the field. It is a time of war. You cannot question the commander-in-chief. The young congressman wrote back to his friend, "The provision of the Constitution giving the war-making power to Congress was dictated, as I understand it, by the following reasons. Kings had always been involving and impoverishing their people in wars, pretending generally, if not always, that the good of the people was the object. This, our convention understood to be the most oppressive of all kingly oppressions, and they resolved to so frame the Constitution that no one man should have the power of bringing this oppression upon the United States. Your suggestions that presidents must be allowed to make war as they choose and to go unquestioned and unchallenged during the course of that war destroys the whole matter of the American experiment. It places presidents where kings have always stood. And I will not put our president there or our republic in that circumstance. Sincerely, Abraham Lincoln." Brothers and sisters, if impeachment is good enough for Abraham Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, then it is good enough for me. Impeach the president, impeach the vice president, change this administration, redeem this republic. Thank you.